Afghanistan is staring into a humanitarian crisis. These tent cities are popping up across the capital after 700,000 Afghans were forced to flee their homes last summer during fighting with the Taliban, now living without food, health care, or hope. We're stuck here in these tents and the winter is coming, he says. We need help. Mohammed Munir Ibrahimi is trying to answer that call. He works for a Canadian organization, here interviewing displaced Afghans to determine how best to respond. Multiple families here are sharing a single tent, including this 15-day-old baby.
They were living in a condition which is not a humanitarian. The situation is very bad.
Ibrahimi's organization, called Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, has received approval for funding from Ottawa to buy badly needed blankets and food. But since the Taliban took over, the country's banking system and foreign aid are effectively frozen.
How we can continue work, given that the Canadian government is not accepting Taliban?
Mohammed Fahik Tahiri runs another Afghan NGO, which is also partly funded by the Canadian government.
Between the international community and the Taliban, it is the people which suffers. It is the people of Afghanistan that are punished.
He says the same organizations scrambling to respond to the humanitarian situation are also dealing with their own crises. His group, which focuses primarily on women's rights, is no longer allowed to have women workers in its office, and almost all of his staff are trying to escape the country. These Canadian-funded groups, particularly those promoting women's rights, now fear they could be targeted by the Taliban.
There are many threats to us because we are not feeling safe.
Afghans who worked for Canadian NGOs are eligible to come to Canada as refugees. We met this Afghan former NGO worker in Pakistan en route to Canada. He received a Canadian visa and escaped the country with his family, including his daughter and his niece. Born just days after crossing the border.
She's lucky and going to Canada soon, and she will have a perfect life here.
But the Canadian government appears to have recently, quietly, changed the rules for refugee eligibility. Around October 14th, the government's website switched from allowing human rights workers who are in Afghanistan to apply to only those who are already outside of Afghanistan.
Canada is taking the easy route. It is easy to process people that are outside of Afghanistan. Trying to process people in a war zone and in hiding, that's not an easy thing to do.
But for those still in Afghanistan, there are few safe routes out. Ibrahimi is scrambling to help the homeless while also worrying about his own family. 2 young children and his wife, an engineer who was completing her MBA when the Taliban took over. She can no longer study or work.
We don't know about our future. We have dark future.
Ibrahimi and his colleagues have applied to go to Canada, but most haven't received a response.
We're still scared that we may be targeted. We may be questioned. We may be. So we need to get out of here.
But for now, he can't leave, and he also can't stay and work in the absence of Canadian funding. Like the Afghans he supports, left in limbo, as Canada and its allies decide if and how to deal with Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Jeff Semple, Global News, Kabul.